The Haunting of Hollow Creek. Detective Eric Stone had handled his share of bizarre cases, but nothing quite like the one that led him to Hollow Creek. The town was buried deep in the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow it whole. A heavy mist clung to the streets as he drove in, his car rattling over the cracked, uneven road. Everything about the place felt wrong. The air was too still, and the few people he saw outside avoided his gaze, disappearing into their homes as he passed by. He had been sent to investigate a series of strange disappearances. 6 people, all gone within the last few months, without a trace. The locals claimed it was the work of something supernatural, an old legend, a vengeful spirit that punished anyone who ventured too deep into the woods. Stone didn't buy into legends or ghost stories. His job was to find answers, real ones. As he pulled into the small parking lot of the town's only inn, the creaky building loomed ahead. Inside, the place was as dreary as the outside. The owner, a quiet man in his 60s, handed him a key without a word. Stone glanced round. There were no other guests that night. Sleep didn't come easily. The bed was uncomfortable, and every little sound, the groan of the old pipes, the wind scratching at the window, kept him on edge. At around 3 a.m., he heard something that made him sit up, a faint, rhythmic knocking sound, like someone tapping on wood. He listened carefully, but it stopped as soon as he got out of bed to check. He shook it off as nothing more than the old building settling and went back to bed. The next morning, Stone made his way to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Marlowe, a grizzled man with tired eyes, met him there. "You won't find anything," Marlowe said after Stone introduced himself. "We've been looking for months. It's that thing in the woods. The elders call it the Watcher." Stone wasn't interested in folklore. "Tell me about the missing people," he asked, pulling out a notepad. Marlowe sighed and handed him a file, thick with reports. As Stone read through the details, young, old, men, women all seemed to have vanished near the outskirts of town, close to the woods. Despite extensive searches, no bodies were found. "I've been around long enough to know when something's out of our hands," Marlowe said quietly. "Some of the families have already left. They know better than to stay when the Watcher's active." Stone raised an eyebrow. "The Watcher, legend says it's an ancient spirit that guards these woods. Some kind of protector until it gets angry. It doesn't like trespassers. You've seen how folks here keep to themselves. We don't go into the deep woods, not even for hunting. Those who've gone missing, they all broke that rule." The detective remained skeptical but decided to start with a visit to the families of the missing. The first was an elderly woman whose granddaughter had been the last to disappear. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. She barely spoke, but handed Stone a small wooden charm. "She made this," the woman whispered, "said it would keep her safe from the Watcher. I found it on the doorstep the morning she vanished." Stone inspected the charm. It was crudely carved, a circular pattern with jagged edges. It gave him a strange feeling, though he quickly dismissed it as just another piece of the town's superstitions. Later that day, Stone ventured into the woods. He stayed near the well-trodden paths but felt an oppressive atmosphere closing in the deeper he went. He noticed strange carvings in the tree symbols that looked similar to the charm he had been given. After hours of searching, he found nothing concrete, but an eerie sense of being watched never left him. That night, back at the inn, Stone woke again to that same knocking sound. This time, it was louder, more insistent. He threw on his clothes and hurried outside, only to find the streets empty. The sound echoed from the direction of the woods. Without thinking, he grabbed his flashlight and headed toward the source. The mist was thicker now, and the deeper he went, the colder the air became. The flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to shift unnaturally. Suddenly, he heard a faint voice, like a whisper carried on the wind. "Help me!" Stone's pulse quickened. The voice sounded close, but the thick fog made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. He followed the sound, hoping it might lead him to one of the missing people. As he pressed on, the trees around him seemed to close in. He noticed more carvings, each more intricate and disturbing than the last. Faces twisted in agony, eyes wide with fear. His breath came in short bursts, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, just ahead, he saw a figure standing still in the mist. A woman, her back to him, her long hair hung limp, and she wore a simple white dress. "Miss," Stone called out, stepping closer. The figure didn't move. He reached out, his hand trembling. "I'm here to help." Just as he was about to touch her shoulder, the figure slowly turned to face him. Her eyes were empty voids, her mouth twisted in a silent scream. Stone stumbled back, his flashlight falling to the ground. In that moment, the temperature dropped even further, and the trees around him seemed to groan and sway. Without warning, the figure vanished, dissolving into the mist. The air was still once more, but the oppressive weight of the forest lingered. Stone picked up his flashlight and sprinted back toward the town, his heart racing. He didn't stop until he was inside his room at the inn, locking the door behind him. The next morning, he went to the sheriff's office, pale and visibly shaken. "There's something in those woods," Stone admitted reluctantly. "I don't know what it is, but it's real." Marlowe nodded grimly. "Told you, we've lost too many good people. Best thing you can do is leave, detective. Some things aren't meant to be found." Stone wasn't ready to give up, but he realized the truth. There was something ancient in Hollow Creek, something that couldn't be explained by reason or evidence. The Watcher wasn't just a legend, it was real, and it had claimed its territory. He left Hollow Creek later that day, feeling the weight of the town's curse pressing down on him. The faces of the missing haunted him, their voices lingering in his mind. But as the town faded in the rearview mirror, he knew one thing for certain: some mysteries were better left unsolved. And as the mist swallowed Hollow Creek behind him, he wondered if anyone would ever dare return.